All right, hey folks. So today I'm going to cover the common complaint of why your knees hurt and what you can do about it. And also I want to educate you on how this occurs. How do we get into a position where our knees are chronically in pain? But firstly, thanks for making it onto my channel. If you have any questions or comments, pop them down below. And if you'd like to work with me on your own strength and physique goals, there's a link in the description. So we're going to go right ahead and bring up some slides. Not done this for a while. So I'm making the case today that your knees hurting is actually a demonstration of a lack of strength across a full range of motion. It's not due to just age or whatever other things people say, like I've got bad knees. People tend to sort of start to identify with their weaknesses and use it as a psychological crutch. A lot of times it's really just poor training practices or non-existent training practices. And that's what we're going to cover today. So I'm making the case for it being a lack of strength across a full range of motion. You're not in pain, you don't have bad knees, you're just piss weak in that range. So now, a common misunderstanding about flexibility is that flexibility is caused by tight muscles, so muscles that are physically just bound up. It's not actually true. Now, the body will purposely inhibit movement. And what I mean by that is, to quote Bald Omni-Man, that's a galaxy brain term for the fact that it will protect you. If it knows you're not strong in a range of motion, it will protect you in that range of motion. So the body will purposely tighten the weaker muscle to safeguard it from being stretched and snapped beyond control. And it will also do that with joints. So therefore, tightness is not an actual binding of muscles. It is your body refusing to let you go into a range where it knows you're weak at. Okay, stretching does help, so I'm not going to deny that, but it doesn't help for the reasons that you think it helps. Like, it doesn't help because the muscle is all bound up, because it's somehow just tight. It's as flexible as it needs to be. Okay, stretching helps because it contributes to that disinhibition effect. So there is no actual like tight muscle. It's your brain purposely inhibiting the movement. It does it as a defense mechanism because it knows, well, it basically knows you've been half-assing your squats, like, to put it in a fun way, right? So your brain knows, so that's why it protects you. So the inhibited muscle group, which is inappropriately weak, the body, for example, knows you're weak in the bottom range of a squat, okay? So it prevents you from going there. Like, for example, most people who say that they can't, well, not most people, pretty much everyone who says that they can't go down all the way on a leg press or on a squat, if you lighten the load enough, they'll be able to go down. It happens. So you can always start somewhere. And there'll always be people out there who say, well, no, but okay, there are maybe some exceptions. But I think a lot of people just convince themselves that that's the case when it's not. So in any case, most people have a sort of a minimum cutoff of weight. And I'll go over later on just how minimum that is. And some supposedly very strong squatters and leg pressers are actually horrendously weak, and what they consider to be a bottom end of strength, which they should be flexible at, is really a lot lower. But anyway, that's the story so far. So next, this is how it all begins. So this begins with the trainee using a partial range of motion. So when they enter the gym, they've either been told not to go all the way down by some of the old heads in the gym. That was the case with me. When I first got into the gym and I was squatting 60, 80 kilos, there was an old guy there and he would tell me, don't go all the way down, you'll snap your shit up. And so I believed him. Side note on that, don't believe all random old guys at the gym when they tell you stuff about training. It doesn't often work. So immediately from day one, what happens is this creates a strength imbalance between the partial range of motion and the full range of motion. And over time, that is just exacerbated, because over time, you continue to get stronger in the partial ranges of motion. And on a side note, we know from the research, it's easier to get stronger in a partial range of motion than it is in a full range of motion. So your strength in that partial range of motion goes up dramatically fast. So what happens is you end up in a situation where your knees are much stronger in the top range, and they're much weaker in the bottom range. So when they're close to being fully extended, they're very, very strong. When they're close to being fully flexed, they're very, very weak, because there's a strength imbalance, okay? Let's put some numbers on it. Let's say you work up to doing 180 kilos, 4 plates aside for partial squats, but you've never even approached depth. Well, honestly, you might not even be able to squat 60. Like, if you can squat 4 plates with a partial range, like I know guys who squat 4 plates with a partial range who cannot squat 1 plate all the way down because it hurts their knees. So it's that extreme. All right, next up. So yeah, the trainee will basically continue to exacerbate this by listening to poor advice, which from people who poorly misunderstand why people get sore knees or injuries and all that kind of stuff. So they'll start to add in more and more protective gear like wraps, sleeves, bands, the whole reverse band thing, which is happening recently. And then more further partials, they'll end up going higher and higher. And eventually they just give up. That's generally what happens. As that's occurring, the knees continue to get weaker and weaker in that bottom range. Now, what happens along this journey is that occasionally you're going to be asked to create force in the range, which is in where the knee is more flexed. So, for example, you might be running, jumping, squatting down to pick something up. And you have such a good, strong range when your knees are fully extended. If you're trying to bend down to reach the floor and pick something up, you're like, oh, my knees. It's because when you can't actually generate a good degree of strength and force in that bottom position, if you're all of a sudden put into that bottom position because of life in one jarring movement, this can damage the cartilage over time because quite simply you've exceeded the knee's capability to handle that load. Because you're a 400-pound half squatter, but you can't bend down to pick up your keys because it hurts your knees because you're not strong in that range. So the knees lack the strength to manage the range that it finds itself in. And this kind of stuff happens every day. So over time, what happens is that cartilage just gets more and more damaged, more and more weak. And it just gets exacerbated every time they go to the gym. And they go to the gym thinking they're making themselves stronger. In actuality, they're exacerbating a strength difference, and then they're getting weaker as a result. So just to sort of bottom line this, knees, therefore, do not weaken through overuse. They actually weaken through underuse. And more precisely, it's when they're asked to perform a task which wildly exceeds their capabilities. Like progressive overload is fine. You demonstrate you're getting stronger by adding a bit of weight to the bar, and that's great. But when you wildly exceed your capabilities, you're going to get hurt. Now, for some people, that could involve just never using their knees. And there'll be people out there who will have been sort of blackpilled into never doing any resistance exercise because they've got a back injury. So the doctor's like, take it easy, just go for walks. And so they never train the back or never train the knees, and eventually they just don't use them. So the knees and the backs are in chronic pain because they're never actually asked to get stronger. So it could be that. It could also be, and it is more commonly probably for people who are watching this video, is underuse in that particular range. So somebody who's just not used to squatting deep. Ask them to go deep and they're in constant pain. They're in constant pain throughout life. They don't know what's going on. They squat to barely parallel. They still get their knees hurt. Like, this is just not me. I've just got bad knees. That must be it. That's my lot in life. When they don't realize the problem is actually self-imposed. They created the problem by creating a strength imbalance from day one and greatly strengthening their joints in a top end range of motion and not in the fully flexed range. So solutions. Now I've painted a grim picture. Solutions. First, regarding range of motion, always train with as full a range of motion as you can. Now, initially, this may involve lightening the load considerably. So you're only as strong as your weakest link. Now, it's not uncommon for 180 kilos, so 4 plates aside, half rep, belt, knee wrap, spotter assisted squatter to only squat maybe a plate aside, plate and a half if he's lucky, in a full range of motion without his knee sleeves, his knee wraps, and comfortably. That's not uncommon. So that guy who you see in the gym, and I see them all the time, I know a guy like this, he squats 4.5 plates with his knees wrapped up, massive wide stance, partial range, spotter holding him up. Like, he's got legs like a twig. And if you put him under a 60 kilo bar and ask him to squat at free range, he'd collapse. It's not uncommon. So first solution is always train with the full range of motion. Now, next is to use alternative exercises. Squats can be relatively unforgiving. Same with leg presses. Also, people have a emotional attachment to their weight that they squat. So, I mean, you can imagine telling a guy who's squatted 4 plates for years and years, look, actually, you're only a 1 plate squatter. I mean, they'll think that's outrageous, but oftentimes they are. So The ego is heavily attached to these things. So often it's easier to just implement different exercises and get people to build up their strength with those. The ones that I use quite a lot for these scenarios with my clients is single leg presses. Very, very good option. Split squats are a good option if they're done with a dumbbell. I'm not a massive fan of them with a barbell because there's a safety issue there, particularly if you have wobbly knees. Leg press is an excellent, safe option. A single leg press is a great option. You can get a nice deep range of motion. It's a great exercise. Split squats, again, very good, tend to be done with dumbbells with a nice full extreme range of motion. Bottom line is that whatever exercise you choose, you have to create strength in the extreme ranges of motion, the fully flexed angles. All right, now, final thing here is exceeding load at this stage will only serve to damage the cartilage further. So you can't start too light. Like, I remember repatterning my squat so it was a deeper, more knee dominant squat, and that was at a time when I was a 220 kilo squatter and I started back at 60 kilos. So that should give you an idea. So patience is required, and only add weight, maybe 2.5 kilos at a time, 5 pounds at a time. On those early stages, you can train the lift more often because you're just building the leg up and the weight is very light. But the point is, do not exceed your knee's capability to strengthen itself. If you're patient, there'll be massive dividends. You'll be running, walking, sprinting a lot better over the years. But it means you have to put your ego aside and really get down to grips with, okay, how strong am I really for full squats or full leg presses? Not so much. And a lot of people don't like to do that. So a lot of people will continue to get injured and they would rather walk around with sore knees than admit to themselves they squat like crap. So, right. I'm going to call it there. So thank you all for tuning in. Hopefully you found that useful as a practical guide for what you can do to strengthen your knees. This is the kind of stuff I do with my clients if they come to me with injury problems. I do it a lot with either ones who come to me with injury problems or advanced clients who haven't yet got there. Because one of the key points about advanced trainees is you have to keep them injury free. So I implement a lot of this kind of stuff for my advanced clients. And for clients who come to me with sore elbows, shoulders, lower back, knees, we can usually fix it. Like, the body is highly adaptive and you don't have to train in pain most of the time. So these are all tips and techniques which are all from experience. I mean, I used to be a powerlifter, and so these are things which I've used over time. And as a result, I'm in good nick at this age. So if you'd like to benefit from that, there's a form down below if you want to contact me for coaching. Please do get in touch, see what I can do to help. And if you've got any ideas for training videos, it'd be good for you to put them down in the comments. If you would like to subscribe to this and it's not too much trouble, hit the subscribe button. If it is too much trouble, then consider just rolling your face across the keyboard and seeing if you get lucky. All right, I'll call it there. Take care, folks.